All right, guys, we are back here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to look ahead all the way to Sunday Night Football because I can't remember an NFL season finale that I've been more excited about than this upcoming Sunday Night Football game that we have to end the entire regular season because there's no Monday Night Football or Thursday Night Football, obviously, this week. So the very last game that we're going to have for the 2024-25 season is going to be this one. And I don't think there's a better game with higher stakes, more on the line than this one, obviously, right? The playoff picture will be complete after the Minnesota Vikings travel to Detroit to settle who will win the NFC North, who will be the NFC's number one seed, and who will earn that one bye week ahead of the postseason starting next weekend. And arguably, the two best teams in the NFC, you want to throw Philadelphia in there, maybe ahead of Minnesota, ahead of Detroit, or maybe just below them. But these two have definitely been some of the most consistent teams in the entire NFL this season, and both Minnesota and Detroit enter this game with a 14-2 record, as last week Detroit kind of played it close against the 49ers, like we kind of mentioned in the first segment, and they rallied after, being down in that game to defeat the 49ers in San Francisco with another great offensive performance by, Jared Goff. Jahmyr Gibbs had a great day, and it feels like that's kind of like the way that they're going to have to do it, right? With all the injuries that they're dealing with. They just keep rolling through these teams. So they're more than capable of doing it, but doing it, into the postseason, it could be a little bit more troubling, depending on if you get the number one seed as well. So that is something that they're going to have to manage, obviously, and having the number one seed would definitely be a lot easier, right, to do it in Detroit rather than being on the road each and every time. But on the side of the Minnesota Vikings, they prevented Green Bay from coming back in their game, right? They had the big lead in that game and they almost squandered it, but they ended up winning by 2 points, sweeping the Packers and, getting to 14-2 on the season. So now, going into this matchup on Sunday Night Football, the Vikings enter with a 9-game winning streak. The last time they lost was back on October 24th against the Los Angeles Rams on the road, while Detroit enters this game with a 2-game win streak after their 11-game win streak was snapped a few weeks ago by the Buffalo Bills. So, just to kind of put it in perspective, what kind of game we're talking about here and where it stands, like historically, and, just to give you guys an idea of how good these teams are and the kind of seasons that they've had also. It's not, just something you always see, obviously, two teams in the same division, mind you, being so consistent and having the exact same record. And for it all to kind of line up for the last game of the season is pretty remarkable. So, one of the things that kind of stands out here is that this game has the most combined wins for any regular season game in NFL history. In this game, the winner becomes only the 9th team to end a season with 15 or more wins in an entire regular season, while the loser will have the most wins for any wildcard team ever in NFL history. The last time two teams met with the number one seed on the line for the last game was in 1993 when the Cowboys and the Giants played, however long ago that was, 31 years ago or something like that. It's not something that just always happens, right? Usually, like in the AFC, maybe not to the degree of the Chiefs, right, obviously, but usually you get an idea of who the number one seed is going to be. Maybe it's a little bit close, but it never lines up to be the last game of the season. Obviously, it was flexed into Sunday Night Football, but for it to all line up like this, two teams in the same division to be two of the best in the NFL, is the kind of stuff that, you only dream you could ever see happen, right? But it's going to happen this Sunday, obviously. And the last thing here, this is only the 4th game ever between two teams that are 10 games above 500. The last time two teams faced off that were 10 games above 500 was in 2005 when the Seahawks took on the Indianapolis Colts. So, again, these two teams, they've been playing some of the best football in the NFL. Obviously, Detroit doing it right from the get-go. When they were fully healthy, they were just steamrolling teams. And then as we get going through the regular season, a lot of guys began to fall. And you did begin to get a little bit worried about it, especially when Aiden Hutchinson went down and Barnes and Alexander Zaloni and Carlton Davis and guys like that, right? But it's a huge merit to them for still being able to be 14-2 and being capable of managing and maneuvering through all those injuries, right? David Montgomery is another one that got hurt as well, and they've just continued to chug along throughout the season, playing against the Bills and the Packers and the Bears, giving them a little bit of trouble as well. It's been a huge accomplishment. So for the Lions to be in this position, right, almost defying all the odds with the injuries and everything like that, to have a season like this at 14-2, and then somehow in one of the outcomes to not be the number one seed seems so insane, because since probably like week 7, I thought the Lions were going to be the number one seed. And I guess that's just a bit of the, I think, national narrative around the Vikings, that nobody really wanted to give them any credit because their quarterback was Sam Darnold. But as much as the Lions should get credit for, maneuvering through all the injuries, a huge, bouquet of flowers to Sam Darnold for being in a spot that nobody ever would have predicted he'd be in. From the Jets, seeing ghosts against the New England Patriots, being shipped out to Carolina, starting the season 4-0 and then having it all crumble down, then being a backup in San Francisco, signing a one-year deal with the Vikings, knowing that J.J. McCarthy was probably going to be the future quarterback, and then to just forget about all of that and be the starter and have the kind of season that he's having, making a Pro Bowl, is, again, another insane thing to happen. It just adds to the whole, mystique of this game. There's so many storylines and so many things to kind of follow up on. It just gets you amped up for it, quite honestly. So, that's a couple things to look out for in the game if you weren't really aware of them going into the game. They already played already, which is the crazy part too. They already played back in week 7, and that time Detroit won that game 31-29 in Minnesota after they were winning 28-17, and they gave up that lead, and they were actually losing, 28-29 at one point until, they got it all together at the end and they kicked a game-winning field goal. But, that was one of the 2 losses that Minnesota has all year. They could be even better than they are now if they would have won that game. But, it is what it is. That game was one of the best ones of the entire season. So to kind of follow up on that with even bigger stakes, even higher stakes, is super, super exciting as well. But getting into the game now a little bit, talking about some of the injuries and, updates on that side of things. For the Lions, first off, their wide receiver Khalif Raymond, who hasn't played since November 24th, was a full participant in practice this week. He's expected to come off of the IR and make his return for the first time in over a month. Also, someone that could be making their return is Lions linebacker Alex Anzalone, who hasn't played since even, longer than Khalif Raymond. He hasn't played since November 17th because of a fractured forearm, I'm pretty sure. He was a limited participant this week, and he could return in this game. It's not as guaranteed as maybe Khalif Raymond being a full participant, but there is optimism that they could have Alex Anzalone back. And to have any one of those starters on defense come back is going to be huge. But of course, you also don't want to rush him back, right? Because if you do play on the road all those games, you're going to want him at his full strength. So we'll see where he stands. I also heard something that David Montgomery could play, but looking at it now, he's labeled as being out, so I don't expect him to play. And everybody else should be good. I don't think there's any big injury news for the Vikings. Everybody, from their standpoint, is pretty healthy, so they should be at their full strength. But before I get into the matchups, there's one thing I want to see from both of these teams, right? One, I'm looking to identify in this game to kind of give me more confidence in them going into the playoffs. For the side of the Minnesota Vikings, I just want to see them close out games. I want to see them close out games, make the plays that they have to make sure they get the win. Because last week, they gave up that lead. They were fortunate not to lose to the Packers, right? But the last game against the Lions specifically, Sam Darnold had, a drive there towards the end of the game where they ended up punting and the Lions, got the ball back and ended up kicking a game-winning field goal. But during that drive, Sam Darnold missed a couple throws, just didn't connect in some of the, gotta have it plays down the stretch there. So if they're able to play a complete game, especially with the way this Lions defense has been trending, I want to see them, close the door on this game. Don't leave it open. Don't leave it to chance. Really be convincing about this win and showing everybody why you deserve to be the number one seed, right? And then for the Lions, kind of like I mentioned about the defense, I need to see something. I need to see something from them because I think the last 3 games, they're averaging about 7.5 yards given up per play. And I saw this morning how the 2 worst teams in that category are giving up about 5.5 yards per play, and the Lions are well above that. So I need them to see something, not just Kirby Joseph intercepting the ball late in the game, right? I need them to get off the field on 3rd down. Everything, especially against the 49ers, looked wide open. Like George Kittle had a bunch of yards wide open. Ricky Pearsall looked like an all-pro in his, in his first year, right? He's still a rookie. He looked like an all-pro receiver, and if it wasn't for that interception, I don't think the 49ers would have ever stopped scoring. So this defense, I need to see something from them. They need to show a little bit of resistance because I have more confidence in the Vikings to do that over the Lions defense. So that's something I want to see. And that goes into the matchups here quickly because one of the matchups I want to see is the Vikings, all of their offensive weapons going up against a Lions secondary with no Carlton Davis this time. Sam Darnold just threw for 377 yards last week against the Packers, and so did Brock Purdy against this defense. So you're not going to have a starter out there in Carlton Davis. You're going to have a rookie out there in Terrion Arnold trying to cover Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jalen Naylor, all these guys. That's going to be a huge matchup. If they're able to stop the passing game and not let Sam Darnold throw it all over the field on them, is going to be huge, right? And then another matchup where we got a matchup that we didn't see in the first game is Jahmyr Gibbs being the premier back now, not having David Montgomery in to kind of spot him, going up against Blake Cashman. Blake Cashman is a linebacker for the Vikings that didn't play in their first game, and he is, a green dot guy, the guy that kind of lines up everything, and he makes up that linebacking core with Ivan Pace Jr., himself, Alex Van Ginkel, to form like a front 7 with Phillips and Grenard and Dallas Turner, right? He's a huge part of that. With Brian Flores, he's a huge part of what Brian Flores wants to do with their defense. So Jahmyr Gibbs, I would say, won the matchup last week against Fred, going up linebacker to running back, and it's going to be another big one in this game as well. And then the last one I want to see is Jameson Williams going up against Stephon Gilmore or Byron Murphy Jr. because Jameson Williams has been playing pretty well the last couple games. He has 4 touchdowns, 257 yards, and 13 receptions. So obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown gets a lot of the attention, but can he continue that, production? Because last time, I think he might not have even had a reception, I don't believe. So if he's able to contribute something, is obviously going to be huge against a passing defense for the Vikings that's a little spotty. So those are all the matchups. And in terms of who I think is going to win, I probably am going to go with the Vikings, because the Lions defense, I think, just really worries me a lot. I did not like what I saw last week against the 49ers. Debo wasn't playing great, and he looked like the old Debo, right? George Kittle has had a great year, but even for his standards, he was getting like wide open. Same thing with Ricky Pearsall. I talked about it before. And, they were just not showing any sort of resistance at all, not really getting to Brock either. So, and the offensive line was banged up too. The Vikings' offensive line is going to be in a lot better shape, you would imagine, going into this game with all of their starters pretty much playing except Christian Darrisaw. So, what I saw from the Vikings last week compared to what I saw from this Lions defense really worries me. And I don't think they really match up that well against them, right? They're going to need to get pressure on Sam while also, giving up some of that cover to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, and those guys. So I think it's just going to be a bit too overwhelming. And I'm going to go with the Vikings, to come out of nowhere and Sam Darnold to lead this Vikings team to a first-round bye week in 2024. Who would have thought? But that is what I think is going to happen in that game. And speaking of what I think is going to happen in games, we're going to get to our final game picks of the regular season, right? We're going to go to part 1 in the next segment, and then after that, finish it off with part 2. So we'll be right back with the final game picks of the regular season.
Looking for